Welcome back to the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast, episode number 96. With Dr. Daniel Stickler. He's a former vascular surgeon who concluded that traditional medicine is not the best route for ideal health. He's now the co-founder and chief medical officer of the Apeiron Center for Human Potential, Apeiron meaning limitless, and is the visionary pioneer behind systems-based precision lifestyle medicine, which is a new paradigm that redefines medicine and the old symptoms-based disease model to one of limitless peak performance. His work now focuses on longevity, epigenetics, and lifestyle optimization. And along with his work at the Apeiron Center, he's the medical director for the Neurohacker Collective, a Google consultant for wearable technology, AI in healthcare, and a guest lecturer at Stanford University on epigenetics in clinical practice. I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Stickler to you today. I was first introduced to Dr. Stickler from Luc Dupron, whose interview opened up my awareness to a whole new level with even just a glance of the title, Limitless Peak Performance and Human Potential, Epigenetics, Aging and Anti-Aging, and the Future of Being a Healthy Human. For those listening, I urge you to be open-minded and think about your own potential. Wouldn't you like to be limitless? Wouldn't you like to improve your longevity? Turn back the hands of time a few years? Let me introduce you to Dr. Daniel Stickler, who has no doubt in his mind that these are all things that will be commonplace in the next 10 years. Even the thought of living to and perhaps past 150 years of age. Get ready to have your mind expanded and pay close attention if you've been searching for ways to increase your productivity, well-being, and results. This is Andrea Samadi on the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast, and my guest today is Dr. Daniel Stickler, an author, speaker, medical pioneer, and expert in human optimization. Welcome, Dr. Stickler. What an incredible honor to have this chance to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time and for all you're doing to expand the world's awareness of what is truly possible when it comes to human potential.
I'm excited to be here. I love talking about this stuff, as you've probably seen from previous podcasts and video interviews.
Absolutely. I've put all of your podcasts in the show notes because you really dive deep into the areas. So I want people to be able to dive deep and access everything that you're talking about in your past interviews. And I've crafted some questions for you, but before we even get to those, I'm sure anyone listening will be as intrigued as I was at exactly what you're doing for this whole new paradigm of health and performance. So before we get to the questions, can we just start out with how what you're doing will really change the perception of the world, just like when Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile and he changed people's perceptions of their ability to do the same?
Yeah, it's, the biggest aspect of it is that we've taken health and wellness and we look at this human system, this body that we have, and we've applied the wrong rules to it, and we've been trying to make decisions based on the rules that we applied, and it's not optimized the way it's doing that because we don't have the basic understanding of this. I mean, when people talk about systems approaches, you hear a lot of people talk about systems approaches in every aspect of life, from politics to ecology, and it applies to the human system as well. So, is this human system, when we look at it, is it a complicated system or a complex system? And it's an important distinction because it changes the way you think about it and it changes the way you intervene with it. And the prevailing idea of the human system has been that it's a complicated system. That's what all the rules are based on. And unfortunately, it's not a complicated system. A complicated system is something that is, it's very linear. So input A equals output B. If you double A, you get double B. And and it's reductionistic. So you can take every piece out, find out exactly what it does, and then put it back in and apply that with another piece. And the way they interact is the sum of the total. And that works great for mechanical things like airplanes and robots and that. But the human system is defined by what's called a complex adaptive system, which means it's not reductionistic. It can't be controlled that way. And when we take that approach to it, we miss the point, because this system, it's a net of all of these things. And because there's feedback loops and everything going on all around the system, you can't predict the outcomes with certainty. And a complicated system requires that you take an input, put it into the system, and you can predict with 100% certainty what it comes out to. And that's kind of what we've done with medicine and health right now, is that we've taken that approach based on research models and the sum of these inputs. And the other thing with a complex adaptive system is it has emergent properties, meaning that as we put the system through stressors, as we change the environment the system functions in, the system adapts, and it won't respond the same way to that same input the next time because it has changed. And this is the approach that we've been taking in our approach to health and wellness, is looking at it from this new way of thinking and approaching it from this whole systems approach.
Well, that's exactly why I asked you to come on the podcast, because I started a couple of months ago. I watched Dr. David Perlmutter's Science of Prevention documentary, where he talked about 5 health staples that were preventing Alzheimer's. And these are basic things that we've all heard about, like daily exercise, good quality sleep, and healthy diet, intermittent fasting, and optimizing our microbiome. And then I saw you on Luc Dupron's podcast, and you seem to take these 5 health staples to a whole new level. Like, this is where the general population is thinking, and then where you're taking this, it's a whole new thought process. Can you explain how you discovered this new world, where it's genetics and epigenetics and your fascination for human systems that led you to the fact that we really can be the architects of our own future?
Yeah, and I'm familiar with those 5 staples that are mentioned there, and I think it's a major underestimate of what actually creates that. I mean, they are core pieces for sure, but what I've learned is that it's hard to isolate anything. The whole concept of root cause, which is like the functional medicine mantra, is propagating that linear model. Again, you get down and you try to identify the one thing that's created this, and it's never one thing. Take a woman who gets a urinary tract infection. I mean, the current thing is, fevers, burning on urination, positive urine culture. Okay, she's got a UTI. We'll put her on an antibiotic and then send her home and see how she does. Mm-hmm. And basically that's completely off track as the way we should be approaching it. So we should be approaching it and saying, okay, well, why did this woman get a UTI in the first place? What was the source of the bacteria that caused it? And why would she get it and this other woman who's similar to her not get that? And you can keep asking these questions. And that's the great thing about complex systems thinking, is you don't run out of questions and you keep going down that model. Does she have some immune issue that makes her more prone to this than somebody else? They found that the microbiome actually plays a role in women getting that. They found that iron levels play a huge role in women getting E. coli UTIs. So women who are iron deficient tend not to get them, but the women that have plenty of iron in the system, they're more prone to them. So all of these things play into that. And that's what we have to start considering to practice really smart medicine and smart health overall. So, I started off as a surgeon, and I worked for 10 years as a surgeon, and I loved it. I was doing general and vascular surgery, but I had a passion for looking at medicine from a different model. When I went into medical school, it wasn't what I thought it was. And I thought it was about making people healthier and really helping them out, but it's a model designed for sick people, and it does an okay job, but not a great job with it because of the way they approach it. And so through the years, I started developing this as a hobby on the side. And eventually, after about 5 years of doing it with surgery, I walked away from the surgery because I loved what I was doing. And, even like, you talk about one of these key staples is nutrition. Everybody knows nutrition. If you want to do anything healthy, it's always nutrition and fitness are the top pieces of that. And even nutrition, there is no perfect human diet. You can't say that this is the diet everybody should eat because everybody is different. And, that got me into genetics, which I can look at polymorphisms in the genetics, and we can look and see ancestrally what have you kind of developed primarily through ancestry for your processing of carbohydrates, of the different fats, of monounsaturated fats, saturated fats, and create a probability-based dietary program that says this is the diet that, genetically speaking, ancestrally, you've done the best with. You take like an Inuit Eskimo, they've got an ancestry of eating high-fat diets, so their genetics are primed for that. And you take somebody who's been in that ancestry, in that lineage, you take them out of that environment where it was high-fat, and you put them on a Western diet, and they don't do well. They get heart disease because there's too many starchy carbs and that in the diet. And the same goes for somebody of Asian background, where most of that ancestry has been a more starchy based diet. You put them on a high fat diet and they're going to get heart disease. So you can customize dietary plans with the genetics, at least give a probability, and then test it as you go to see if that works. Same applies to exercise. And then sleep is another core category, which most people, they don't like to pay attention to sleep. They say, I just can't sleep. I've tried everything. Nothing works. And then they give up on it. But sleep is absolutely critical. I mean, I've had people that came in for weight loss and they were doing everything right except sleeping with good quality sleep. We fixed that. And then suddenly they were losing weight doing the exact same thing. So you've got to look at all the pieces that play into that. Now, microbiome was part of the Alzheimer's protocol for the key staples, but problem is we just don't have enough info on the microbiome right now. We don't have enough info to accurately test it, and even if we knew what it was, it's hard to manipulate it in any way. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of trillions of cells that you're trying to adjust by taking a spoonful of probiotics. It just doesn't have that big of an impact that most people think it does. And it can actually, recent study 2 years ago showed it could make it worse. So we tend to focus on getting the health of the system and the health of the gut to an ideal state where it will take care of itself, because your gut adjusts to your environment. I mean, you change your eating habits, just like going out of the country. You go to a different country and you change an eating style, and generally your gut doesn't like that very well. And it will rebel on you until it has time to adjust and adapt to a microbiome that's more suited for that type of a dietary plan.
Well, this is powerful right here, because most of us are not optimizing these 5 staples. So when I was looking at your work, I thought, well, we've got to start here and then start looking at what you're doing, and you're measuring these with tools, with technology. Is that right? Like someone would come to see you and you're taking this to a whole new level. So my sleep would be monitored with like a Whoop device. Yeah. And nutrition would be monitored. Would you be monitoring my blood sugar on a dashboard? What would you be doing with me if I was coming to see you to take this to a new level?
Yeah, so we do all sorts of metrics. I mean, we are very data driven. I won't put anybody on anything like a different diet or a different supplement or a different medication until we establish the metrics that we're going to use to measure whether it's doing what we think it's doing. So many people just take supplements because they read something about it, and they have no way to say whether it's working or not. They just say, oh, I feel better on it, or I don't feel any different, but it says it's supposed to work on this. There are ways to measure that stuff, and they can be indirect. I mean, with the Garmin, we use we use the Garmin, the higher level Garmins that have a lot of data that come in on them. And we have our clients wear them 24/7. And we collect their sleep data. We collect their resting heart rates, their stress levels or heart rate variability. We can look at their sleep patterns, and they're not great for tracking sleep, but they're good from a dynamic standpoint. So you can look at where they were in the baseline before any changes were made and see how it changed when you implemented the change in the diet or the exercise pattern or whatever you're doing. So we always like to have some kind of a metric. We'll do blood work periodically every 3 to 4 months in the first year. We do brainwave mapping, so we map the brainwave patterns, and we'll do psychophysiologic stress profiles where we look at how your autonomic nervous system responds to stressful events and see if we can work with that to optimize the outcome.
And mainly the people that you've been working with, would you say they're high-level executives and pro athletes, or would you be seeing more entrepreneurs and people that just have a craving now for this?
Yeah, I mean, we're across the board with that. I mean, we have a lot of the entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are really, it's funny because they'll get really involved into their careers. They have a very successful career, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what happened to me? And these are driven people, and then they realize this, and they realize they've gone so far that they're having trouble pulling it back with effort. We have a lot of those. We have a lot of C-suite executives that come to see us. We have a couple professional athletes, but we also have, just the everyday biohackers that are really interested in leveraging aspects that are available now that, you can't get through most conventional medical care. And even the lifestyle stuff that we do. I mean, lifestyle is probably 90% of what we're working on. And the other 10% is this cutting edge technology and peptides and that kind of stuff.
Well, I had no idea how my level of awareness was going to change before I began looking at your work. And I actually came from the personal development industry, and I worked with this speaker. He challenged us on a daily basis to look at the world and think of the opportunities. And he would say, don't just look through the keyhole, open the door and see the possibilities out in the world. So I've always been operating from this point of view. What do you think about where we are in the world today? Do you think the rest of the world is ready for what you're working on right now with where we are?
I would say the rest of the world is not ready right now. We generally say we work with that 1% in the population that really, we co-create with our clients with purpose, on purpose, and for purpose. I mean, that's our mantra. And the idea is that these are really self-motivated individuals that come to us that just need the Sherpa that's going to help them get to the summit. And that's what we're guiding them with. We show them new tools. We show them how to use those tools. We give them our inputs when needed. And the idea is that it's their personal journey. But, we go well beyond what standard. I mean, we started off, the first couple of years we were focused on body. So it was about, the sleep, the physical performance of the body, that kind of approach. And then we started getting into stress response, and we were like, yeah, this is really important. We've got to start working with this. So we added in-depth stress metrics, and then we saw that we needed to work with the brain as well. So we started working with cognitive function and how do we optimize this and what can we use? And so we had the body and the mind. And then about 2 years ago, we added the part of spirit, which I think is overlooked in a lot of care because it's important. And, it's kind of cliche, the body, mind, spirit thing, but it is relevant for sure. I mean, when we work with people, we're working with identifying purpose. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, everybody's in this pursuit of happiness. And the thing is, happiness isn't an object to pursue. Happiness is a side effect of something. And so all this positive psychology and pursuit of happiness, I think, has taken us off track. And it's because we've lost purpose and identifying a purpose for ourselves. So we work with that. We work with developing a more collective consciousness, a more unity consciousness, a more interactive piece with the environment. I mean, environment is a huge part of what we do in working with people, and how, you know, this human system doesn't end at the skin. It's everything out there. And this is what epigenetics tells us. I mean, even the air we breathe every breath, our cells are sampling what's happening in the environment and saying, what do I need to change in order to thrive in this environment? Every food we eat, we don't even call food nutrients necessarily, we call them bionutrients, because they actually have an effect on the biologic expression of our cells. And people look at it as only a calorie mix, a macronutrient mix, and it's truly a bioactive nutrient. And, you know, the water we drink, the food we eat, the air we breathe, the exposure outside, all of this plays into it. So I think people have overlooked that aspect of what it means to do that.
And really, there is no limit to what we're capable of. Like, you've given us a lens to see that we could be so much more with what you're measuring, which is in essence what the speaker was urging us all to do: open the door and see what you can do. And now you're providing us with some tools here, which is powerful. And Simon Sinek built his career on, you know, his book starts with why. So I'm not surprised that you're finding the connection with the spirit. And this kind of brings me to the next question. You mentioned a concept called interoception, or the ability to listen to the signals within your body. And we've actually talked about it on the podcast because we had Dr. Dan Siegel on, and he's got this wheel of awareness meditation where he takes you through the parts of your body. When you're doing this meditation on a daily basis, this strengthens. Can you talk about this skill? Maybe, you know, pro athletes use it in their career, and maybe like a special operations person uses it in a life and death situation. But what about just the regular person? How could we use this skill to take our results to a next level? And, you know, how would you teach somebody to develop this?
Yeah, and we're in our minds so much of the time. We're not in our bodies, but we're in our minds. And this is where we've kind of gotten off track with things. Interoception to me is that ability to understand the signals that come from the body. I mean, we've gotten so far away from this. I mean, ancestrally, when we were surviving on the environment and had to pay attention to this, it was important. But now, I mean, people wake up and they eat breakfast and they don't even ask themselves if they're hungry. It's like the time of day and you just have to eat. So they're not even seeing what their system's telling them and whether that signal seems right or not. You know, I've caught myself. I look at the clock and it's noon, and all of a sudden I get hungry just because I looked at the clock.
Right.
And so I try to get people to start paying attention to that. And one of the things about the wearable monitors is we're able to quantify impacts in the environment or impacts that we're feeling in the body and seeing how that relates. And so over the course of the year, I'm working with clients, because I get on a video call with my clients every month, and we go through their dashboard on their data, and we say, okay, look at this, you know, Saturday and Sunday, your stress levels really shot up, you know, and this is the weekend, you know, what's going on here? And we'd say, what did you do Friday night? Oh, I went out with some friends and we had some drinks. Okay. Alcohol actually raises stress level pretty dramatically for most people, and they're not aware of it. But when you start paying attention to it, you can start feeling it the next morning. You're like, oh, okay, I see the difference between the days when my stress level is really low versus really high. I kind of learned this early on. I did a lot of meditation work, and I was doing Renzai Zen and Soto Zen meditation, and I then went into Vipassana. And Vipassana has this body scanning aspect to it that you can do. It's kind of a subsect of it, where you just kind of scan what's happening within each part of your body. I mean, you start at the toes and go to the head, and you spend as much time feeling into that one piece of what's happening in your body. And that's where I first started paying attention to that interoceptive piece, for sure.
That's a very powerful skill. My mom was always trying to teach me these skills when I was young, preparing me for where I was going. And I never really understood it until now, years later, I can see where all these skills come into play. I watched your interview with Brian Rose you did for London Real, and you give an incredible overview of the work you're doing. So I've included that link in the show notes for what you're doing over at your centers. And then you did an interview with Ari Whitten, and I followed him for years on the work he's doing with the mitochondria. But you go deep into the best peptides to boost mitochondria health, brain health, and longevity. Can you just give a brief overview, because this is new to me. I've never heard of using peptides versus pharmaceuticals, but can you just give an overview of what you're doing with this and how?
Yeah, peptides are kind of a new biologic, I kind of refer to them as, because they're biologically developed. They're not foreign to the body. They're strings of amino acids that are usually segments of peptides or proteins that the body naturally makes, and maybe there's an alteration here or there with them. But the peptides are very on target with what they do. So you can isolate a segment that we know attaches to this receptor on fat cells, or this receptor on muscle, or how it interacts with the nuclear DNA. So we can isolate very specific pieces of it and have a very on target effect. And it's amazing what we're able to create with this. I mean, using the body's own chemistry to say, you know, how can we upregulate this? Well, we do it with the way the body does it naturally, except we just give it in a very focused dose. This is different than medications and supplements even, where you have something that goes into the human system. It's an input that is having an on-target effect, but it also has off-target effects. So it's going to affect other systems as well. And we always tell people, everything you put into the system essentially has a pro and a con to it. There is a benefit and there is a detriment to everything that we put in. And you just have to look at it and weigh the pro versus the con and make sure that the net is positive in what you're trying to achieve. And the peptides don't have that big of a imbalance between the pros and the cons. And so we like to use those because they're so on target. Now, you're not going to see a lot of these in mainstream medicine because most of them can't be patented. Right. You know, a segment of an amino acid that the body naturally makes can't be patented. They have to modify it in some way to make it patentable. And so there's not a whole lot of people getting money to do research on peptides. And a lot of this is the N of one people doing this online. I mean, I kind of troll around these N of one groups and see what they're doing, what's working, and see if it makes, you know, sense making to me. And we kind of go from there.
And you deal with peptides for weight loss, for anti-aging, for
mitochondrial health.
Wow. For pretty much everything that people need, you've got the answer. Now,
well, I mean, we have probabilities of answers. You know, nothing works consistently for everybody. So we trial and error a lot of these things.
Now, did I hear this right? Because I built the podcast Neuroscience Meets Social Emotional Learning. My whole purpose of this was to bring the most current neuroscience in with the social emotional skills and these EQ skills that are missing in the workplace. Did I hear you say somewhere that you have a peptide that can help with compassion and empathy, or what did I hear there?
Well, we're hoping, you know, we've already got empathogens out there. They're not necessarily legal, but empathogens are there. You know, people looked at oxytocin as an empathogen, but problem is taking oxytocin, either nasal injection or oral, it doesn't get into the brain. But that doesn't make it invaluable. It doesn't make it not worth anything, because you still get the peripheral effects of oxytocin in the body. So the heart feels the oxytocin release, and the heart's connected with the brain. So you're actually going to get some aspect of that there. This aspect of the oxytocin not crossing into the brain is a new finding out of Hopkins. It's I think it's a soon to be published study that I was able to talk with the head of research there and had a long conversation about that. But, you know, you have things like melanotan 2, which is an injection that people use to accelerate tanning of the body. But melanotan 2 is actually a segment of alpha MSH, which is a peptide that the brain secretes, and it has a lot of effects on the system. And this melanotan-2 actually gets into the system and causes oxytocin release. So it doesn't necessarily work in the nucleus accumbens, which is where most of this emotional stuff occurs, but it's like right next to it, and there's a ton of it released. So the crossover is there, and we've experienced that with melanotan-2 in ourselves and in some of our clients. They reported it, but I'm really excited about things like some of the psychedelics that are going to become legal soon, like MDMA. I mean, you look at the scientific value of something like MDMA, and it's pretty amazing. It is a true empathogen. I mean, it causes a massive dump of dopamine and serotonin, but more importantly, in combination with that comes the oxytocin at the nucleus accumbens. And what they found with this is, during early life, we have a social developmental period that kind of peaks around the age of 8 or 9, where we're learning social interactions. And then it starts to really plummet down to about age 15, and there's not much training, and you can't change it much at that point. And at 25, you can't change it at all. Mm-hmm. So you're locked into a kind of a social context that you developed in your early 8 to 12-year-old child. And that doesn't apply very well in adult life now, because society has changed. So they found, I think, working with autism and some of the mice studies, that a single dose of MDMA was able to open up that social developmental period fully for a 2-week period after a single dose. And, it's important that if that happens, you've got to make sure that the social stuff that you do during that time is really in line with what you're trying to achieve. I'm got my fingers crossed that the data that's coming out on MDMA will get it passed to be available medically, because I think there's huge value in it, as we're seeing also with the psilocybin research. And if we can get the stigma away from it, from the party aspect of it, and start really looking at it from what it can do and the potential it has to really upgrade the human system, I think is amazing.
Well, this is fascinating. Are you still spending every day from 5 in the morning till 7 doing your research? Is this still?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm actually shifted a little bit. I'm waking up about 4:30 now.
All right.
I don't know why, but we go to bed at 9:30 every night, just because we're not very productive in the evenings. In the morning, our brains are like lit up, and we're able to. So my wife and I, we just kind of sit in bed, and we read stuff to each other and talk about things that are exciting in the world. And I mean, there's some days we'll sit 4 or 5 hours before we even start our day, just going through stuff and talking about things. It's great.
Oh, I love that. This is cutting edge information, and I really appreciate you spending the time with me here. What is your vision for what you're doing and building with your centers?
We want to help people to understand the human system better, because I think once they understand it, it will give them more power to do something. I've talked about the 100th monkey in many of my talks, and we're seeing this shift in the collective. And when we get to that tipping point, I think we're going to have people say, hey, wait a second, what is this? So that's why I say right now we're dealing with the 1%, but eventually that 1% is going to hit that exponential rise, and we're going to see a lot of people coming on board with it. And, we've got 400 coaches worldwide right now that are really using this model with their clients in life coaching. So, we're making inroads into it and gradually getting there.
Well, this is exciting. So for someone that wants to perhaps get a hold of you, you mentioned to me beforehand that you have the DNA kits, because I think Brian Rose talked about the fact that you had tested his DNA when I was watching that interview, and I thought, well, that would be amazing to have my DNA tested and then have your experts analyze it. And then what are you doing with that DNA kit?
Well, interestingly, we are just moving to a direct-to-consumer version of it, although I don't recommend making any inroads into that with just the direct-to-consumer version. I mean, I've got videos on there that explain each of the different segments of the test, but you really have to have an epigenetic coach to kind of guide you through it, because genetics is, I mean, it's the hardware of the system. It's wired in there. It's not going to change, but the expressions of the genes change, and that's the epigenetics, and that's the stuff you have control over. We can give you an overview of that, but without somebody interacting with you, the ability to really progress is hampered with just the test. So if you go to getmydnakit.com right now, you can order the kit and get the initial report, but then you can also add on time with one of our certified coaches. So we've got over 100 certified coaches right now. We've got 300 of them in training that are heading that way. But the certified coaches are well-versed in this systems-based approach in genetics and epigenetics, and really helping to create that lifestyle response that's going to give you the best outcomes.
Well, that's powerful. So for anyone that wants to get more information on that, I'll put the links right in the show notes. And you also have certified coaches, or could someone become a certified coach? You have so much on your website.
Yeah, we've got a big ecosystem. I mean, we've got a genetic company, we've got a teaching company, we've got medical centers, store. But for the coaching, it's Apeiron.academy right now.
Right.
We are working on getting a international certification for the coaches too in health and wellness. So we're making some modifications to it that are going to go into effect in January. But if you sign up now, you will get the new course as well. So you'll be able to at least sit for a certification at some point. But it's about 90 hours of training. So it's a lot of training. And our group, though, it's so amazing. I mean, we have physicians, chiropractors, psychologists, naturopaths, traditional Chinese medicine. They're all learning together on the same platform. They help each other. So it's a pretty amazing group.
Well, I love it. I want to thank you so much for your time today. This is very serious work. And I've heard you say that you're a serious coach and you give guidance to those to help them on the right path. And you're not a cheerleader, and you won't be like that person that doesn't call someone out on their crap, which I love, because you're not going to help anybody get anywhere if you're a cheerleader. So this is the only way to get serious results. I love what you're doing, and I want to thank you so much for the opportunity for me to learn from you and for all that you're doing for the world. I hope that the listeners have a look at your website and go and get one of the DNA kits if they're interested in moving forward. Is there any other final thoughts that you want to say to close out?
No, I mean, just keep your mind open. Don't stay in a lens of the limited human. I mean, genetics, what I've learned about DNA is it is the most incredible, amazing molecule that is in existence. I mean, we're not even coming close to explaining the way it works and the potential that it has. I mean, look at every aspect of life on this planet comes from the same code, just organized in different ways. So, I mean, the potential is enormous with this. And if we can get away from that limited mindset and look at the possibilities of what's out there, I mean, who knows what can happen with it.
That's why you say we're limitless.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Thank you for having me.